Security! Remove this girl immediately! She obviously doesn't have money for first class. The words cut through the cabin of American Airlines Flight 447 like a blade. 17-year-old Sarah Williams looked up from her medical textbook, her brown eyes meeting the cold stare of flight attendant Janet Morrison. This section is reserved for actual passengers, not charity cases, Janet continued, her voice loud enough for the entire first-class cabin to hear. Sarah's hands remained steady as she reached into her backpack. Around her, phones appeared. Whispers started. A woman in 3B began live streaming. Janet crossed her arms. Some people need to learn their place. Sarah's fingers found what she was looking for in her bag. She pulled out a leather portfolio, her movements deliberate and calm. Have you ever been so underestimated that people forgot to check who they were really dealing with? Janet Morrison had been a flight attendant for 12 years. She prided herself on spotting trouble before it started. And this teenager in seat 2A? Definitely trouble. Sweetie, let me see that boarding pass again, Janet said, her tone dripping with false concern. Computer errors happen all the time. Coach is just through that curtain. Sarah handed over her boarding pass without a word. The gold lettering was clear. First class, seat 2A, Williams, S. Janet studied it like a detective examining evidence. Probably an upgrade mistake. System glitches when people use points incorrectly. The passenger in 3B, Maria Santos, adjusted her phone's angle. Her Instagram live stream showed 127 viewers and climbing. The comments were already flowing. Is this really happening? Someone needs to record this. Get her name tag. Sarah's medical textbook lay open to a chapter on cardiac emergency procedures. Her gold medical ID bracelet caught the overhead light as she turned the page. The engraving was small but clear. Dr. S. Williams, emergency contact, Mayo Clinic. Ma'am, I need to make a phone call, Sarah said quietly. Janet laughed. Oh, honey, no. We're about to push back. All devices need to be in airplane mode. She keyed her radio. This is Janet in first class. I need ground supervisor Mike Torres up here. Passenger situation. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom. Flight attendants, we have departure clearance in 8 minutes. Prepare cabin for pushback. 8 minutes. Sarah opened her phone and scrolled to a contact labeled Dr. Chen, emergency. She pressed call, then immediately ended it. On her screen, a text appeared. Protocol activated, standing by. Janet noticed the phone. Miss, I just told you. It's doctor, Sarah said softly. And this is a medical emergency notification system. Federal regulations allow emergency communications even during taxi. That wasn't entirely true, but Janet didn't know aviation law well enough to argue. She just huffed and turned to greet the ground supervisor climbing aboard. Mike Torres was everything Janet expected backup to be, tall, authoritative, and completely willing to assume the black teenager was the problem. What's the situation, Janet? Mike asked, not even looking at Sarah. Passenger in first class. Claims her ticket is valid, but... Janet shrugged meaningfully. Mike finally looked at Sarah. She was reading about surgical procedures while wearing what appeared to be hospital identification jewelry. Something felt off. But he'd been doing this job for 15 years. Rich kids with fake IDs weren't uncommon. Miss, we need you to gather your things and move to your assigned seat, Mike said. I am in my assigned seat, Sarah replied, showing her boarding pass again. The live stream viewer count hit 284. Maria Santos whispered into her phone, Y'all, this is getting crazy. They're trying to move this girl just because... Probably stolen, Janet whispered to Mike, loud enough for the nearby passengers to hear. Or bought with points that don't belong to her. Sarah's thumb hovered over another contact in her phone. Board emergency line. She took a deep breath, the kind they taught in medical school when you needed to remain calm during a crisis. Sir, Sarah addressed Mike directly. I'm Dr. Sarah Williams. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. but if you'd like to verify, I can provide additional identification. Janet scoffed. Doctor, she's 17. These kids think they can say anything. Mike was getting uncomfortable. The passengers were staring. The live stream was at 412 viewers, and something about the girl's calm confidence was unsettling. Look, let's not make this complicated, Mike said. Just show me some ID that matches the ticket and we can sort this out. Sarah reached into her leather portfolio. She pulled out a hospital ID badge attached to a Mayo Clinic lanyard. The photo matched. The title read, Chief Resident, Cardiac Surgery. Mike blinked. Janet leaned in to read it. That has to be fake, Janet stammered. The captain's voice returned. Flight attendants, we need to push back in 4 minutes. Is there a delay? 4 minutes. Sarah looked directly at Janet. Ma'am, I tried to handle this quietly, but you've made that impossible. She scrolled to another contact. Uncle Robert, direct. Her finger paused over the call button. I really didn't want to do this, Sarah said, more to herself than to anyone else. The live stream hit 678 viewers. Comments were exploding. Call the news! This is discrimination! Post this everywhere! Maria Santos had tears in her eyes as she filmed. These were the real-life stories that needed to be told. These touching stories of young black excellence being questioned and challenged simply for existing in spaces they'd earned the right to occupy. Mike Torres pulled out his own phone and quickly Googled Sarah Williams Mayo Clinic. The search results made his stomach drop. Janet saw his expression change. What? What did you find? But Mike couldn't speak. He was staring at a medical journal article. Youngest chief resident in Mayo Clinic history makes breakthrough in pediatric heart surgery. The photo showed the same girl sitting in seat 2A. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Chen. Legal team activated. Document everything. 2 minutes until departure. Sarah looked up at Janet and Mike, both now pale and silent. Last chance to handle this professionally, she said quietly. Janet's radio crackled. All crew, we have a ground stop order. Hold departure indefinitely. The confusion in the captain's voice was obvious. Ground control, please repeat. We were cleared for pushback. Negative flight 447, corporate ground stop. All passengers remain seated. Sarah hadn't made her call yet. But someone else had. And a ripple of confusion through the cabin. Passengers checked their phones. Flight attendants exchanged glances. Janet's face had gone from confident to concerned in 30 seconds. Why would corporate issue a ground stop? Mike whispered to Janet. Sarah remained perfectly still in seat 2A, her medical textbook open, her hands folded. But her eyes tracked every movement around her. 2 TSA officers appeared at the aircraft door. Late Officer Martinez had dealt with these situations before. Unruly passengers, fake documents, travel scams. He walked down the aisle with the confidence of someone who'd seen it all. We got a call about a passenger issue? Martinez asked Mike. Janet jumped in before Mike could respond. This girl is using fraudulent identification to sit in first class. She's pretending to be a doctor. Officer Martinez looked at Sarah. 17, maybe 18, black, reading what appeared to be a medical textbook, wearing hospital identification. The cognitive dissonance was immediate. Miss, can you step into the aisle, please? Martinez asked. Sarah marked her page carefully and stood. As she moved, her medical ID bracelet caught the light again. Martinez noticed it this time. I'm Dr. Sarah Williams, she said calmly. I'm a cardiac surgery resident at Mayo Clinic, and I'm traveling on legitimate first-class ticket 4A7B9X2. Maria Santos, still live streaming, whispered to her phone. 1,247 viewers now. This is insane. Officer Martinez had 2 decades of experience reading people. Something about this girl's composure was unusual. Most people in her situation would be defensive, angry, or scared. She was none of those things. Ma'am, I'm going to need to see multiple forms of identification, Martinez said. Sarah reached into her portfolio again. She produced her driver's license, hospital ID, medical license, and boarding pass. All matching, all legitimate. Martinez studied each document carefully. His partner, Officer Chen, ran the medical license number through their system. License is valid, Chen confirmed quietly. Issued to Sarah Elizabeth Williams, age 17. Board certified in... Wait, this can't be right. What? Martinez asked. Board certified in cardiac surgery, active medical license, emergency contact listed as Mayo Clinic administration. Janet felt the blood drain from her face. That's impossible, she's just a kid. The live stream viewers had climbed to 1,789. Comments were flying faster than Maria could read them. This is viral material. Someone tag the airlines. Get this to the news. Black excellence being questioned again. Sarah's phone buzzed. A text from Legal, Williams Foundation. Media monitoring activated. Documentation in progress. Mike Torres was frantically Googling on his phone. The search results were damning. Teen prodigy becomes youngest cardiac surgeon in Mayo history. Medical marvel. 17-year-old saves 3 lives in single night. Williams Foundation donates $2.3 billion to medical research. He showed Janet the screen. Her hands started shaking. Dr. Williams, Officer Martinez said, his tone shifting, I apologize for the confusion. Your identification appears to be legitimate. Appears to be? Sarah asked quietly. Martinez cleared his throat. Is legitimate, ma'am. Janet wasn't ready to back down. 12 years of authority couldn't crumble in 12 minutes. She could have stolen those IDs. Identity theft is sophisticated these days. Sarah looked directly at Janet for the first time since this started. Ms. Morrison, would you like me to recite the medical licensing requirements for cardiac surgery, or perhaps demonstrate my knowledge of Federal Aviation Regulation 382.7 regarding discrimination in air travel? The cabin had gone completely silent except for Maria's whispered live stream commentary. Regulation 382.7 states that airlines cannot discriminate against passengers based on race, color, national origin, religion, sex, or ancestry, Sarah continued. Violations carry federal penalties starting at $55,000 per incident. Officer Martinez stepped back slightly. This was moving beyond his jurisdiction into civil rights territory. Janet's radio crackled again. Janet, corporate office on line 1. They need to speak with you immediately. The timing was suspicious. Sarah hadn't made any calls that anyone had seen. But someone, somewhere, was clearly paying attention. I can't take a call right now, Janet radioed back. We have a situation. Janet, the voice was firm. Take the call, now. Mike Torres was reading more search results on his phone. His face had gone pale. Janet, he whispered, we need to talk. Privately. But it was too late for private conversations. The live stream was approaching 2,000 viewers. Screenshots were being shared across social media platforms. The hashtag #Flight447 was beginning to trend in Minneapolis, St. Paul. Sarah's phone rang. The caller ID showed Dr. Chen, Mayo Clinic. She answered on speaker. Sarah, are you safe? Dr. Chen's voice filled the first-class cabin. I'm fine, Dr. Chen, just experiencing some travel difficulties. The hospital received an alert from your emergency contact system. Do you need legal assistance? Janet's eyes widened. Emergency contact system? Not yet, Sarah replied. I'm hoping this can be resolved professionally. Sarah, you know the Foundation has protocols for these situations. Should I activate them? Sarah paused. She looked at Janet, whose confidence was visibly cracking. She looked at Mike, who was still staring at his phone in horror. She looked at the TSA officers, who were clearly out of their depth. Give me 1 more minute, Dr. Chen. Understood. I'll be standing by. Sarah ended the call and looked directly at Maria's live stream camera. This is what discrimination looks like, she said quietly. It doesn't always come with slurs or violence. Sometimes it's just the assumption that you don't belong where you've earned the right to be. The live stream comments exploded. Truth. Preach. This girl is incredible. Share this everywhere. Janet's radio crackled one more time. Janet, you have 30 seconds to take this corporate call or you're suspended pending investigation. Mike grabbed Janet's arm. Take the call, please. But Sarah was done waiting. She scrolled to a contact in her phone labeled Board Emergency Line and pressed call. The number she dialed wasn't just any corporate line. It was a direct line to the American Airlines Board of Directors, and it was answered on the first ring. Williams Foundation Emergency Line, this is Rebecca. How can I help you, Dr. Williams? The voice came through Sarah's phone speaker, clear enough for everyone in first class to hear. Janet's face went white. Mike dropped his phone. Officer Martinez took another step back. Sarah's voice remained perfectly calm. Hi, Rebecca. Authorization code Bravo 77. I need to speak with Uncle Robert. Uncle Robert. As in Robert Williams, as in the chairman of the Board of American Airlines, the man whose family foundation owned 12% of American Airlines' medical transport contracts. The girl they'd been trying to remove from first class wasn't just a passenger. She was family. The silence in first class was deafening. Every passenger, every crew member, every officer froze as they processed what they'd just heard. Uncle Robert, chairman of the board, American Airlines. Please hold for Mr. Williams, Rebecca's voice said through Sarah's phone speaker. Janet Morrison felt like she was falling through the aircraft floor. 12 years of employment, pension, benefits. Everything she'd worked for was potentially evaporating because she'd made assumptions about a black teenager. Mike Torres was frantically scrolling through the Williams Foundation website on his phone. The numbers were staggering. $2.3 billion in medical research funding, $847 million in annual airline medical contracts, board positions on 17 major corporations. And there, in the Foundation's leadership photos, was Sarah Williams, listed as youngest board member in Foundation history. Officer Martinez whispered to his partner, "We need to step back. This is way above our pay grade." The live stream viewer count hit 2,847. Maria Santos could barely keep up with the comments flooding her screen. Oh my God. Plot twist of the century. They messed with the wrong girl. This is going viral. The hold music stopped. Sarah? Sweetheart, are you okay? The voice that came through the phone belonged to Robert Williams, 67-year-old chairman of American Airlines Board of Directors. His tone was that of a concerned uncle, but underneath was the steel of a man who'd built a multi-billion-dollar empire. Hi, Uncle Robert, Sarah said, her voice still impossibly calm. I'm fine, but we have a situation on Flight 447. I'm already aware. Rebecca activated our monitoring protocols the moment you called. I have the live stream pulled up on my screen. Are you being treated respectfully now? Sarah glanced at Janet, who looked like she might vomit. The situation is evolving. Sarah, honey, put me on speaker so everyone can hear this clearly. Sarah tapped her phone. Robert Williams' voice filled the cabin with unmistakable authority. This is Robert Williams, chairman of American Airlines. To whom am I speaking? Janet's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Mike Torres found his voice first. Mr. Williams, this is Ground Supervisor Mike Torres, employee number 47291. Sir, there's been a misunderstanding. Mr. Torres, I don't believe we've been introduced, but I'm very familiar with your employee record. Janet Morrison, are you there? Janet finally managed to speak. Yes, sir. Ms. Morrison, employee number 82047, hired April 15th, 2012. Janet, I want you to explain to me why my niece is being harassed on one of our aircraft. The word niece hit the cabin like a physical blow. Maria's live stream exploded with comments. The viewer count passed 3,000. Sir, There was confusion about her ticket validity, Janet stammered. Confusion? Janet, my niece holds a first-class annual pass. She's been flying with us since she was 12. Her ticket was purchased through our corporate family account. Sarah reached into her portfolio and pulled out a black card. American Airlines Lifetime Elite Status. The kind reserved for board members and their families. Moreover, Robert continued, Dr. Williams has personally saved the lives of 3 passengers during medical emergencies on our flights in the past 2 years. She's performed CPR at 35,000 feet and guided our crews through cardiac episodes that could have been fatal. Officer Martinez was slowly backing toward the aircraft exit. This was far beyond a passenger dispute. Sarah, Robert's voice softened. Do you want to continue with this flight? Or would you prefer to take the family jet? Uncle Robert, this isn't about my comfort. This is about making sure this doesn't happen to other people. I understand. Sarah, are you recording this conversation? The incident is being live-streamed by a passenger. Current viewer count appears to be over 3,000. Mike Torres closed his eyes. A live-streamed conversation with the chairman of the board during a discrimination incident. This was career-ending territory. Excellent, Robert said. Transparency is important. Janet, I want you to understand something. The Williams Foundation provides American Airlines with $847 million annually in medical transport contracts. That's 12% of our specialized services revenue. Janet's knees went weak. She grabbed the seat back for support. But more importantly, Robert continued, my niece represents the future of aviation medicine. She's consulted on our medical emergency protocols. She's trained our crews on cardiac crisis management. She's literally saved lives in our aircraft. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Chen. Hospital legal team standing by. Medical board notified of discrimination incident. Uncle Robert, Sarah said, I need to ask you something on the record. Go ahead, sweetheart. As chairman of American Airlines, what is the company's official policy regarding discrimination based on race, age, or perceived socioeconomic status? Robert's voice became formal, corporate. American Airlines has zero tolerance for discrimination of any kind. Federal law requires equal treatment, regardless of race, color, national origin, religion, sex, or ancestry. Our employees receive annual training on these requirements. Janet felt tears forming. The training she'd skipped, the mandatory diversity sessions she'd rushed through. And what are the consequences for employees who violate these policies? Sarah asked. Immediate suspension pending investigation. Mandatory retraining. Potential termination depending on severity. And the company faces federal penalties starting at $55,000 per incident. The live stream chat was moving so fast it was unreadable. #Flight 447 was trending nationally. News outlets were picking up the story. Sarah, I'm going to handle this personally, Robert said. But first, I want to make sure you're comfortable continuing this flight. I am. But Uncle Robert? Yes? I think Ms. Morrison needs to understand that this isn't about punishment. It's about education. Janet looked up sharply. Was the girl she'd humiliated actually defending her? Janet, Sarah addressed her directly, I don't want you to lose your job. I want you to understand why what happened here was wrong. Janet's tears spilled over. Dr. Williams, I made assumptions, terrible assumptions, based on your age and my race, Sarah finished quietly. Yes, and I was completely wrong. I'm so sorry. The livestream viewer count hit 4,200. Comments were praising Sarah's grace under pressure. This girl has more class than most adults. Teaching moment instead of revenge. This is how you create change. Janet, Robert's voice came through the phone. You're suspended effective immediately pending mandatory bias training. If you complete the program successfully, you can return to duty. Dr. Williams will personally oversee your retraining curriculum. Mike Torres stepped forward. Mr. Williams, I also made assumptions. I should have verified the situation before involving security. Mr. Torres, you'll join Ms. Morrison in the training program. And effective immediately, I want you both to know that American Airlines is implementing a new protocol. Sarah smiled slightly. She knew what was coming. We're launching an app-based discrimination reporting system. Passengers can report incidents directly to corporate executives in real time. No more relying on crew members to self-report their own bias. The implications were staggering. Every discrimination incident would be documented, tracked, and escalated immediately. Furthermore, Robert continued, Dr. Williams will lead our new Dignity in Aviation initiative. She'll train crews on unconscious bias and medical emergency protocols. Sarah's phone showed another text from the foundation. Legal settlement offer prepared. Recommend acceptance and donation to civil rights organization. Uncle Robert, I have one more request. Anything. Every passenger on this flight experienced trauma from witnessing this incident. I'd like them to receive compensation for the delay and the distress they've endured. Maria Santos almost dropped her phone. The girl was asking for compensation for the witnesses? Done. $500 vouchers for every passenger on Flight 447. The cabin erupted in surprised murmurs. Sarah had turned her discrimination into benefit for everyone who'd witnessed it. Sarah, sweetheart, is there anything else you need? Just one thing, Uncle Robert. I want to make sure Janet and Mike understand that this was a learning opportunity, not a punishment. We all have unconscious biases. The goal is to recognize them and do better. Janet wiped her eyes. Dr. Williams, I don't deserve your kindness. You deserve the chance to grow, Sarah replied. We all do. The live stream viewer count passed 5,000. The story was spreading across social media platforms. Traditional news outlets were requesting interviews. Ladies and gentlemen, came the captain's voice over the intercom, we've been cleared for departure. Flight attendants, prepare for pushback. Sarah closed her portfolio and returned to her medical textbook, as if nothing had happened, but everything had changed. 3 hours into the flight, Sarah's phone rang again. This time, the caller ID read Patricia Stone, CEO. Sarah had been expecting this call. Dr. Williams, this is Patricia Stone, Chief Executive Officer of American Airlines. I'm calling to personally apologize for the treatment you received on Flight 447. Sarah put the call on speaker. The first-class cabin had been unusually quiet since takeoff. Janet's replacement flight attendant, Marcus, had been treating everyone with exceptional courtesy. Ms. Stone, I appreciate your call. Dr. Williams, I've been briefed on the situation by Chairman Williams. I want to discuss immediate policy changes and long-term solutions. Maria Santos, still occasionally live streaming, perked up. The viewer count had stabilized around 1,200, but engagement remained high. This was becoming one of those real-life stories that people shared for years. First, CEO Stone continued, effective immediately, American Airlines is implementing the Dignity Protocol. Every customer-facing employee will have access to a real-time discrimination reporting app. Sarah opened her laptop, a medical-grade device with specialized software for reviewing cardiac imaging. But today she was looking at the preliminary app designs that had been sent to her email. The app will allow passengers to report incidents directly to executive leadership, Stone explained. Every report generates an immediate alert to our C-suite team. No delays, no filtering through management layers. What about false reports? Sarah asked, her medical training making her consider all variables. Good question. The app requires photo or video evidence, witness contact information, and geotagged location data. Fraudulent reports carry legal consequences under federal communication laws. Mike Torres, who had been quietly sitting in jump seat since the incident, was taking notes. His mandatory training would begin in 48 hours, but he was already trying to understand where he'd gone wrong. Ms. Stone, Sarah said, what about the training component? I'm glad you asked. We're partnering with the Williams Foundation to develop a comprehensive bias recognition program. 8 hours of initial training followed by quarterly refresher sessions. The numbers were significant. American Airlines employed 133,000 people globally, 8 hours of training per employee represented over 1 million hours of bias education, the largest corporate initiative of its kind in aviation history. The training will cover unconscious bias, de-escalation techniques, and cultural competency, Stone continued. But more importantly, it will include real scenarios, role-playing exercises based on actual incidents. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from her Uncle Robert. Legal team has prepared settlement offer, $75,000 plus program funding. Recommend acceptance. Sarah had already decided what to do with any settlement money. The NAACP Legal Defense Fund could use it more than she could. Ms. Stone, I want to discuss the financial impact of these changes. Of course. The initial training program will cost approximately $12.8 million. The app development and maintenance will run $3.2 million annually. But we project savings of $45 million per year in discrimination settlements and legal fees. The mathematics of discrimination were stark. It was cheaper to prevent bias than to settle lawsuits. More importantly, Stone added, we're projecting increased customer satisfaction scores and improved employee retention rates. Discrimination incidents create hostile work environments for everyone. Maria's live stream comments were engaging with the corporate transparency. Never seen a CEO admit costs like this. This is actual accountability. Other airlines taking notes. Sarah's medical pager buzzed. An emergency at Mayo Clinic. She glanced at it. Code Blue, Pediatric ICU. Someone else would handle it. Dr. Chen had arranged coverage for her travel days. Ms. Stone, what about industry-wide changes? Already in motion. We're sharing our training protocols with Delta, United, and Southwest. The FAA is considering federal discrimination reporting requirements for all airlines. The ripple effects were expanding beyond American Airlines. One incident on Flight 447 was potentially changing how 2.5 million aviation employees worldwide approached customer service. Dr. Williams, I want to discuss your role in these changes. Sarah had been expecting this too. Medical residents didn't typically consult for major corporations, but her situation was unique. We'd like to offer you a position as Chief Consultant for Medical Ethics and Passenger Dignity. The role would be part-time, compatible with your residency schedule. The offer was substantial. $150,000 annually, plus travel allowances, plus research funding for bias studies in medical settings. The position would involve developing training materials, consulting on policy changes, and serving as our liaison to medical organizations worldwide. Sarah considered it. Medical school debt was significant, even for someone from a wealthy family. But more importantly, the role could create systemic change across multiple industries. I'm interested, Sarah said, but I have conditions. I'm listening. First, all training materials must be peer-reviewed by medical ethics experts and civil rights organizations. Second, the program must include measurable outcomes, not just training completion, but actual behavior change metrics. CEO Stone was quiet for a moment. Those are excellent conditions. Agreed. Third, other airlines must have free access to our training materials. This can't be a competitive advantage. It needs to be an industry standard. Maria's live stream viewers were watching corporate policy being negotiated in real time. The transparency was unprecedented. Dr. Williams, that's unusually generous. Ms. Stone, discrimination isn't a business problem, it's a human problem. Market solutions won't fix systemic bias. The captain's voice came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our descent into Los Angeles. Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin for landing. Sarah looked around first class. Every passenger had been watching this conversation unfold. These were the touching stories that people would tell their families, their friends, their colleagues. Ms. Stone, one final request. Yes? Janet Morrison and Mike Torres. I want them in the first training cohort, not as punishment, but as case studies. Their experience today, their honest reactions and learning process, that needs to be part of the training. Janet, listening from the galley where she was reviewing termination paperwork, started crying again. The girl she'd discriminated against was advocating for her inclusion in recovery programs. Dr. Williams, CEO Stone said, "In my 23 years in corporate leadership, I've never seen someone turn personal trauma into systematic reform so effectively." "I learned it from my patients," Sarah replied. "When someone's heart stops, you don't blame them for the failure. You fix the system that caused it." The plane touched down at LAX. As passengers began gathering their belongings, Sarah's phone buzzed with a final text from Uncle Robert. "Board meeting tomorrow. Full approval for all proposed changes. Proud of you, kiddo." Sarah closed her medical textbook and packed her laptop. In 3 hours, she'd be back at Mayo Clinic, reviewing surgical schedules and patient charts. But first, she had a discrimination settlement to donate and a new consulting contract to review. Maria Santos ended her live stream after 4 hours and 47 minutes of coverage. Final viewer count, 8,743. Total engagement, 127,000 comments. Hashtag FlightForward47 had reached 2.3 million social media impressions. But the real impact wouldn't be measured in views or clicks. It would be measured in the airline employees who thought twice before making assumptions. In the passengers who felt safe to report discrimination. In the systematic changes that made air travel more dignified for everyone. As Sarah gathered her things, Janet approached her. "Dr. Williams, I know I don't deserve to ask, but would you be willing to personally conduct my bias training?" Sarah looked at Janet, really looked at her. She saw fear, shame, but also genuine desire to change. "Yes," Sarah said simply. "We all have more to learn." 6 months later, the changes were undeniable. Janet Morrison stood in front of 40 American Airlines employees at the company's training facility in Dallas. She wore a name tag that read, "Bias Training Coordinator," alongside her employee number, the same number she'd nearly lost on Flight 447. "My name is Janet Morrison," she began, "and I discriminated against a black teenager because I made assumptions about who belonged in first class." The room was silent. These were real-life stories that cut deep, raw, honest accounts of how unconscious bias manifested in everyday interactions. Dr. Sarah Williams was 17 years old, a cardiac surgery resident, and the niece of our board chairman. But even if she'd been none of those things, I was wrong to treat her differently because of her race and age. Janet had completed 127 hours of bias training, diversity education, and conflict resolution courses. She'd read books, attended seminars, and worked with civil rights organizations. The transformation wasn't just professional, it was personal. The Dignity Protocol app has received 2,847 reports in 6 months, Janet continued. 43% were found to be valid discrimination incidents. Every single one was addressed within 24 hours. The numbers told the story of systematic change. Discrimination incidents at American Airlines had dropped 67% since the Flight 447 incident. Other airlines implementing similar programs showed comparable improvements. Mike Torres had been promoted to Regional Diversity Coordinator. His first-hand experience with unconscious bias made him uniquely qualified to train other supervisors on recognizing and addressing discrimination. "The app doesn't just document problems," Mike explained to his training group. "It creates accountability. When passengers can report directly to executive leadership, employees think twice before making assumptions." Dr. Sarah Williams had completed her first year as chief consultant for medical ethics and passenger dignity while maintaining her surgical residency. Her dual expertise in medicine and discrimination had created new protocols for passenger medical emergencies and bias response. She'd also donated her $75,000 settlement to the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, specifically earmarked for transportation discrimination cases. "Medical emergencies don't discriminate," Sarah told a conference of airline medical directors. "A heart attack looks the same regardless of the patient's race, age, or perceived social status. Our emergency response protocols need to reflect that reality. Her work had expanded beyond airlines. Hospitals, hotels, and retail chains were adopting modified versions of the Dignity Protocol. The Williams Foundation had funded $12.8 million in bias research across multiple industries. Maria Santos, the passenger who'd live-streamed the original incident, had become an inadvertent documentary filmmaker. Her Flight 447 video had reached 4.3 million views across platforms. She'd used the attention to highlight other discrimination incidents and create a social media community focused on civil rights advocacy. "People ask me why I kept filming," Maria said in a follow-up interview. "But these touching stories need witnesses. Black stories, specifically Black excellence stories, get questioned and diminished. Documentation protects truth." The Dignity Protocol app had been downloaded 847,000 times. Passengers across all major airlines could now report discrimination incidents with photo evidence, witness statements, and real-time location data. Federal Aviation Administration officials were considering mandatory bias reporting for all airlines. The Flight 447 incident had reached congressional attention, leading to proposed legislation requiring discrimination training for all transportation employees. "One teenager's courage changed an entire industry," said Congresswoman Angela Davis during House Transportation Committee hearings. "This is how systematic reform happens: one incident, properly documented and courageously addressed." Janet's personal transformation extended beyond her job. She'd begun volunteering at community centers, mentoring young people about bias recognition. Her own children had started asking different questions about race and privilege. "I used to think I wasn't racist because I didn't use slurs or join hate groups," Janet reflected during a diversity workshop. "But I learned that unconscious bias can be just as harmful. Assumptions based on appearance, age, or perceived social status, those create discriminatory outcomes even without intentional malice." Mike Torres had implemented bias interruption training for all supervisory staff. When discrimination incidents occurred, supervisors were required to pause, assess their assumptions, and verify facts before taking action. "The goal isn't perfection," Mike explained. "It's recognition and correction. We all have biases. The difference is whether we act on them without examination." Dr. Sarah Williams had returned to Flight 447's exact route 6 months later, a symbolic gesture that hadn't gone unnoticed by airline staff. She'd been greeted by name, treated with respect, and thanked for her contributions to policy reform. But more importantly, she'd observed other passengers receiving the same respectful treatment regardless of age, race, or appearance. "Systematic change requires individual accountability," Sarah noted in her quarterly report to American Airlines executives. "But it also requires structural support. Apps, training, policies. These create frameworks for better behavior." The success metrics were measurable: 67% reduction in discrimination incidents, 34% improvement in customer satisfaction scores, 23% decrease in employee turnover rates, and $8.7 million in avoided legal settlements. But the real victory was harder to quantify. The Black teenagers who now flew without fear, the elderly passengers who weren't questioned about their ticket validity, the families who traveled with dignity intact. 2 years after Flight 447, Dr. Sarah Williams graduated as the youngest cardiac surgeon in Mayo Clinic history. She'd saved 37 lives during her residency, published 12 papers on medical bias, and consulted for transportation companies across 4 continents. Her consulting work had evolved beyond airlines. The Dignity Protocol was now standard practice for Amtrak, Greyhound, and major cruise lines. International aviation authorities in Europe and Asia had adopted modified versions of her bias reporting systems. "The most powerful response to being underestimated," Sarah said during her medical school commencement speech, "isn't anger or revenge. It's systematic change that prevents others from experiencing the same discrimination." Janet Morrison had become American Airlines' Director of Inclusive Customer Service. She traveled the country training employees, sharing her story, and helping other companies develop bias interruption protocols. Her own transformation had become a case study in corporate diversity programs. I was taught that admitting mistakes shows weakness, Janet reflected in her final training session. But I learned that acknowledging bias and working to change it, that's actually strength. The original Flight 447 live stream had become required viewing in civil rights courses at universities nationwide. Maria Santos had parlayed her accidental documentation into a career in social justice filmmaking, creating documentaries about transportation discrimination. These life stories, touching stories of individuals confronting systematic bias, had inspired policy changes across multiple industries. The ripple effects extended far beyond aviation into healthcare, retail, hospitality, and education. Mike Torres now directed diversity training for the entire transportation sector through a Department of Transportation initiative. His experience with assumption-based decision-making had made him a sought-after expert on supervisory bias. The numbers spoke to lasting change. Discrimination incidents across all major airlines had decreased 73% since 2025. The Dignity Protocol app had processed over 127,000 reports, leading to policy changes at 847 transportation companies worldwide. But the real legacy wasn't measured in statistics. It was measured in the Black medical students who now traveled to conferences without fear of being questioned, in the young professionals who sat in first class, knowing their achievements would be respected, in the families who flew together with dignity intact. Dr. Sarah Williams continued practicing cardiac surgery while consulting on bias reduction. She'd established the Flight 447 Foundation, providing legal support for transportation discrimination victims and funding bias research in medical settings. Every discrimination incident is a heart attack in our social system, Sarah explained in her final interview about the Flight 447 incident. You don't blame the patient for the cardiac arrest. You fix the underlying conditions that caused it. The systematic changes had created a new standard for corporate accountability. When discrimination occurred, companies now had frameworks for immediate response, employee education, and policy reform. Janet Morrison's children had grown up understanding that bias could be unlearned, that mistakes could become teaching moments, and that systematic change required individual commitment. Have you witnessed discrimination during travel? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience matters, and documentation creates accountability. Download airline apps that include discrimination reporting features. Use them when you witness bias. Be the voice for passengers who might not feel safe speaking up. Subscribe for more stories of quiet courage creating lasting change. Hit the notification bell, because these real-life stories need witnesses. Share this video with someone who needs to see that dignity isn't determined by age, race, or appearance. Every share amplifies voices that deserve to be heard. Sometimes the most powerful response to being looked down upon isn't shouting back. It's quietly proving they chose the wrong person to underestimate.
This isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of what happens when truth meets visibility. At Beat Stories, we believe exposure is the first step to transformation. Subscribe and stay tuned, because the next story might be yours.